Naheed Nenshi joins me now in studio. Mr. Nenshi, thanks for coming in.
Thanks so much for having me.
Appreciate this. 2021, after 11 years, 3 terms as mayor, you said that you were not going to run, stepping down, and that you wanted to leave politics. Talk to me about that decision. Why at that time you said no more politics?
You know, I had been mayor of Calgary for 11 years, and during those early days of the pandemic, I was really struck after the murder of George Floyd, after so many other things were going on, that there were so many people who felt like they didn't have a voice in politics. And as a Gen Xer who sort of has been trained to wait for the boomers to retire, I said, you know what, it's probably time for us to make room for some fresh voices, to let some new voices come forward and try out what they think about the world. And you know what? It was probably a good opportunity for me to step back a little bit. It was 11 years of a lot of work, lots of states of emergency, running a really complex organization. And, you know, at that time, that felt right. Did I regret it a lot between my stepping down and the actual election? Probably every day. But in the end, I knew it was the right thing for Calgary.
Why did you regret it?
You know, it gets exciting. Not just the adrenaline of the whole thing, but really more along the lines of, you know, if you've seen the Broadway musical Hamilton, being in the room where it happens. And so being part of the ability to actually make life better for people. The City of Calgary's mantra is making life better every day. And it's something that I really enjoyed working with my 15,000 colleagues at the city to try and make happen.
So, you know, you were a fixture in Calgary politics. You now are hoping to be a fixture in Alberta politics across the province. But why not a time for fresh voices now?
That is such an important question. And it's one of the reasons that I have really been spending my time thinking about whether this is right for Alberta, but also for me. And you know, I had no intention of getting back into politics. And so many people have been approaching me since the last provincial election saying, you should consider this, you should consider this. And I kept saying no. But as I watched Danielle Smith and the UCP and this government, which is not just immoral, but frankly dangerous. It's a government that punches down on vulnerable people. And at a time like this, at a pivotal time in history, where we're facing issues of climate change, of economic sustainability, of economic justice, I should say, really helping people get through the affordability crisis and so many other things, I realized that having this terrible government in place for any 1 minute longer than it should be is actually detrimental to the future of Alberta and to the future of Canada. And so the question I really had was, all right, what's the best way of getting a government that Albertans deserve? And enough people said to me, listen, you can't be on the sidelines and just talk about this. You have built up the experience and the expertise to take on Danielle Smith. You should think about doing it. And that's fundamentally how I got there.
You prided yourself as being kind of nonpartisan. What are you going to do to convince people now that you actually are an NDP guy?
You know, I think the trick in politics, and something that a lot of people in political parties bizarrely fail to understand, is that the whole point of politics is you want to welcome in people who change their mind, who become your supporters, rather than subject them to some sort of, your grandfather wasn't here and you weren't here before that. And so for me, part of the conversations I've been having over the last several months with people really have been around this question of, does this group represent my values? I'm not interested in a takeover. The N in NDP doesn't stand for Naheed. What I am interested is in understanding if what I fundamentally believe in matches these folks, and how we can help more Albertans understand if they share these values. And I got to the point where I went, you know what? These are my values.
Well, you have been critical of the Alberta NDP in the past, particularly for their business and economic policies. Have you come to terms with those policies? And are there disagreements that still exist? Do you want to change this party?
You know, I think that fundamentally there's always going to be disagreements in a big tent party. And I do think that the Alberta New Democrats need to be a big tent party. And I will say that, yes, I had a number of fundamental disagreements with them on electricity, for example. But I think they actually get it now. You know, our utility bills in Alberta have increased fourfold, and that's mostly because of the UCP. but it's partly because of some of the policies of the previous government. And to their credit, to Rachel Notley's credit, and to the party's credit, no one in that party will say they did everything right from 15 to 19 when they were in government.
And I mean, your endorsement of Rachel Notley in this past election was kind of lackluster.
Yeah, some people would say that. But what I really wanted to do, and remember, I'm a political commentator, I'm not a party partisan. And what I really wanted to do was help people walk through my thought process of how did I get to the point where saying the NDP was the right choice. And, you know, that endorsement, it wasn't written for partisans to go, yay us. It was written for people who had never cast a ballot for the NDP before to say this is something I should consider. And guess what? It made a difference in the election, I think. So,
okay, so what has changed within the party that now you think, okay, yeah, this is my party now?
So in Calgary, for example, the NDP now has the majority of MLAs. All but 3 of them are brand new. And I spent a lot of time talking to them. I've spent a lot of time talking to the caucus in Edmonton as well, and the few members outside of Calgary and Edmonton. And what I've really learned is that within that caucus, there is an enormous desire to redefine a better Alberta, a more sustainable Alberta for everyone, economically, financially, socially. And they are ready. And I have yet to, I think there was one out of all the folks I've talked to, NDP supporters across the province, who said, you know what, you're an outsider. Every other one said, come on in. You may or may not win, but come on in. We want you there and we want your ideas.
So
there.
What did you say to that one individual that thought you were an outsider to convince them otherwise?
Great question. So, you know, I'm not sure I did convince them otherwise, but I said just this, which is we cannot have a test where someone who more recently supports us is less valuable than someone who's always supported us.
Yeah.
And we have to appeal to Albertans. So the story of my coming to this place needs to be a story that we repeat for all Albertans. Because if we say you're an outsider to people who vote for us, they're not going to vote for us.
I just want to, you know Rick Bell quite well.
I'm aware of him, yes.
Let me read you a little bit of this op-ed in the Calgary Herald recently. They will talk about how their man is so nerdy and cool. They will plot strategy over brunches at hipster dinners, where they'll talk about how the NDP will be as cool as Nenshi. Avocado toast for the table, please. They will hope...
That is Rick Bell.
That is Rick Bell. They will hope no one remembers how Nenshi's popularity declined when he was Calgary mayor. Their man, once enjoying massive support, then coming to a close, losing his job to a lousy candidate in the last election. I want you to respond to that, and also the criticism that you have had previously that you were difficult to work with when you were at City Hall.
Happy to do both. So number one is, if the NDP is taking its cues from UCP talking points as reported by Rick Bell, you know, that's probably not how you should run a party. Those people do not have your best interests in mind. But if I wanted to really be snarky about it, I would point out that after 11 years, leaving with a close to 60% approval rating, which is a higher approval rating than Danielle Smith has ever had, that's not really losing massive support. Most politicians would be pretty darn happy if that was when they were walking out. But that said, I don't care about approval ratings, I care about results. And this mythology, like, I'm a big guy, I got a big voice, I got giant clown feet, and that has really led to a lot of folks saying, oh, he's all about him.
Yes,
but here's the thing. When you're the mayor, you don't have a caucus. You don't have a team. You have 15 individuals, and on my councils, they span from the far left to the far right, and you got to figure out how to get them to work for the betterment of Calgary. And I am hugely proud of the fact that the vast majority of our votes on City Council over 11 years passed unanimously. Right. And I think that tells you everything you need to know about working with a team.
You are a guy from Northeast Calgary.
You are.
As I am, indeed, Marlborough Mall. But, you know, you worked your way up. You went to Harvard. You became mayor of Calgary. And some people will say, yes, this is about ego for him, right? What do you say to those that think it's about ego?
Well, I would say, you know, look, I can argue with you about that all day.
Right.
You know, and for those who are not getting the reference to a national audience, in Northeast Calgary, very working class.
It is.
Well, that with the Marlborough Mall, where I worked my whole life, is really part of that. I'm still very proud of that. But I didn't just get here, right? You had to do the work, and I was lucky to have a community that supported me in doing that work through public education, public libraries, public transit. I even learned to swim at a public pool badly. And public health care was always there for my family. And to me, that story is the story of how people in Alberta should be able to move forward. You know, I grew up I always say sometimes we were poor, and when we weren't poor, we were very poor. But the fact that someone growing up in that milieu still is supported by the community to be able to get to where they are, I think is an important thing. Look, there's nobody in politics who doesn't have an ego. You wouldn't do this if you didn't have thick skin. There are lots of other things you can do in life. But for me, the service, the seva, I always use that word, of other people is what allowed me to get to where I am. So here's my opportunity now, I think, again, to be able to try my own seva and see if I can help make that path easier for all those kids behind me in Marlborough.
What's going to be the strategy in the Fort McMurrays, the Lethbridge, rural Alberta, small town, small city Alberta?
I was just about to correct you.
I know, yeah, I corrected myself in my head. Yes, small cities, but in parts of the province, you know, that may not have the ideology that you had when you were at City Hall in Calgary.
Well, remember that the ideology at City Hall was a lack of ideology. The purple that I wear every day...
And orange I see as well today.
You might have noticed that. The purple that I wear every day is not, you know, it's red and blue. That's the whole point of it. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean you have to be always in the center. What it means is that as human beings, we shouldn't define ourselves by our tribes, but we should define ourselves by our commonalities, by our common humanity. I know that sounds a bit high and mighty, but that's really the symbolism behind the work that I've done all this time. And in addition to growing up in Marlborough, in working class Marlborough, which shares a lot of similarities with the places you mentioned, mm-hmm. I also grew up just outside of Red Deer. I went to a junior high school that had its own rodeo. I did not participate in the rodeo, but I had a lot of fun going to the rodeo. And so I think that when we start stripping away those divisions, urban versus rural, small city versus big city, yeah. Oil field versus service sector, and we just say, look, we're Albertans. We are blessed to live in a place that not only has abundant natural resources, but thanks to lots of good decisions by lots of governments in the past, is one of the richest places in the world. And all of us want our kids to have a great education and not sit in classrooms with 40 people. All of us want the ambulance and the ER to be there at the moment we need it. All of us want to stop wildfires and drought and flood from impacting us every single day. And I think appealing to those commonalities will help a lot. And, you know, I'm a known quantity. Even if you're in Red Deer or Lethbridge or Grand Prairie, you probably have some idea who I am, and you probably have some idea of how great we were able to do in Calgary. And so I think that gives me a real good start to have those conversations.
I was talking to a source with the UCP today, and they said Naheed Nenshi is a great target. You look at the Olympics, for example, and that failed bid, and that was an example of him being out of touch with kind of the day-to-day issues that Calgarians were facing. So respond to that, and also sure. What you think Danielle Smith is doing wrong right now. You alluded sure. to some of it with you know, some of the social issues.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, you know, again, it's probably not a great idea for me to take advice from the UCP mm-hmm. on who they think is a great target, because clearly that's their spin. I mean, let's just plainly say that. Yeah. They're not saying that about any of the other candidates because they don't want me there because they're already scared. And they're trying to presuppose this now, which is fine. Politics is not about fear, it's about hope, but that's fine. Let them do that. Let them do what they need to do. And I'll remind you that if Danielle Smith got the vote that I lost on in the Olympic bid, she would have won more seats in Calgary. So we're starting at a whole different place. That was my biggest failure, certainly. I've talked about it a lot, but I still got more percentage of votes for the yes side in that bid than the UCP got in most ridings in Calgary. Yeah. So given that, I will tell you a little bit more about Danielle Smith. Look, I have had 6 premiers while I was mayor. And over the course of my life in Alberta, there have been multiple premiers. We've never had a government like this before. I cannot point to a single accomplishment of this government. All I can point to is, I say they only know how to do 2 things. They know how to pick fights, and they know how to waste money. And while they're picking fights and wasting money, the healthcare system isn't on the brink of collapse. In many small towns in Alberta, it has collapsed. Yeah. Our class sizes in education are the highest in the country. Our economy is doing okay because oil is doing okay, but our last budget, 2 budgets ago, have massively increased the reliance of the Alberta budget on oil and gas royalties. And this time the Premier had a conversion on the road to Damascus and said we need to stop doing that. But she still has the highest spending budget in Alberta history. And barely balanced. In fact, most accountants would say not balanced because she's borrowing money from one area to look at the surplus when times are good. So she's not preparing our economy for the future. She's letting the social system collapse, and she spends all her time fighting with Stephen Guilbeault and Justin Trudeau. Albertans deserve better than that.
All right. Last question. Are the colors going to be, are they actually going to be orange and purple? Wait and see.
Check out Nenshi.ca and you'll know.
Naheed Nenshi, thanks for popping by Canada tonight.
Thanks, Travis.